Okay. Does everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, thank you. All right, so hello everyone. My name's Arthur Kolot, and today we're going to be talking about the history of sound recordings. There is a lot to say about this topic, and we won't be able to cover it all today, but I wanted to give you a brief overview of the subject and then talk about the early history. I hope you find this topic as fascinating as I do. So to get started, I wanted to conduct a poll just to see how you listen to music nowadays. Um, so let me see if I can find the polls here. There we go. So here's the first poll. I'm going to launch it now. Let me know if you can see it. And I want us to think about the ways that we listen to music nowadays and how they compare to the way that people have listened to the music in the past. So go ahead and fill out the poll and feel free to select multiple answers. Um, I will just tell you, since I can't take the poll myself, that I listen to streaming music via streaming services, and I still listen to CDs and vinyl records sometimes. And of course, I listen to the radio. I no longer listen to tapes, but I'm old enough to remember listening to music on tape. And I actually remember recording myself and music from the radio onto cassette tapes. Um, so yeah, has everybody taken the poll? Let me end the poll and share the results. So I think what we can see here is, I guess everybody listens to streaming services. Um, the majority listen to actual downloaded files. One person listens to the radio. A couple people listen to CDs. Actually, one person listens to tapes. That's great. And a couple people listen to vinyl records. Nobody said other, so we don't have to deal with that category. Um, but yeah, the idea is to think about the way we do it nowadays versus how people have done that in the past. So I'm going to stop sharing the results of that poll. And I wanted to uh, take one more quick quiz before we start. This is the question of, sorry, one second here. This is the polls quiz. Okay, back. We'll launch my second poll here. This is, when do you think the first sound recordings were made? Here you only select one choice. Do you think it was the 1830s, the 1850s, the 1870s, or the 1890s? Go ahead and put your answer in, and let's see who gets it right. Um, okay, so it looks like we have 5 responses so far. I'm going to end the poll and share the results. So it looks like one person thought 1830s, a couple people thought 1850s, a couple people thought 1870s. So 1830s is a good guess because that's the beginning of photography. 1870s is also a good guess because that is when Thomas Edison patented the phonograph. So that's when a lot of people think of the beginning of sound recordings, but actually it was in the 1850s. So the two of you who said 1850s are right. Um, the see here, yeah, the this is the timeline of major milestones in the history of sound recording, and actually it does start in 1857 with something called the phonautograph. Um, the history then continues on to phonographs, gramophones, vinyl discs, and magnetic tape, and then to CDs in the 1980s and digital files like MP3s, which brings us into the current century. This may seem like a long history, but it's really only about 175 years. And when you think about the fact that musicians play music from the Renaissance or from the medieval period or even from ancient times, you'll realize that that this history is really just sort of on either side of the 20th century and relatively short by comparison. Um, the lesson today won't be able to cover all of this, as I said. We'll only be looking at the very beginning of sound recordings in the late 19th century and early 20th century, but future lessons in this series will examine the later developments. So I have two main objectives for this lesson. The first one is to discover and access sound recordings in different formats. And number two is to think critically about these recordings. And specifically, I want you to think critically about the technological, historical, and cultural aspects of sound recordings. I want us to keep in mind this big idea that information creation is a process. And the products of these different processes will have different constraints and different capabilities. So I want you to think about what value these different formats had for people at the time and what value they still have for us today. So, jumping right in 1857, a man named Edouard Léon Scott de Martinville made the very first record of an actual sound wave. So, this device he invented was called the phonautograph, and the record was called the phonautogram. This device was only built to visually represent sound. So, it did not capture the sound itself, and it could not play the sound back. So, nevertheless, it did make a record of the actual sound wave as a visual image. And the way it worked was you would make sounds, for example, singing or playing the trumpet or whatever, into that open drum, and that would vibrate a membrane on the other end of the drum. And then there are bristles attached to that membrane, which function as a stylus to record the sound wave on a sheet of soot-covered paper, which was rotating on that cylinder by means of a hand crank. And so these phonautograms, which you can see on the right, were preserved in various places and then basically forgotten about until 2008, when a group of researchers began using digital imaging technology to read them and then convert them back into audio. And so quite amazingly, what we hear is someone, probably Scott de Martinville himself, singing a French folk song called Au clair de la lune. And so I want to listen to one of these very first sound recordings with you. This one is from April 20th, 1860. Let's see if I can get the sound recording here. Okay, so that was it. If you know this song, you can actually recognize the melody. And so from a historical point of view, 1860 was right before the outbreak of the American Civil War. And we have this record from that time, the very first of its kind, of a man from Paris singing Au clair de la lune. So the value of these recordings is that they provide us with a picture of what was happening in the second half of the 19th century as the technology of recorded sound was being developed. So now we jump to 1877, 20 years later, and Thomas Edison patents the phonograph, which is a device that looks very similar to the phonautograph, but in this case, it actually records the sound as a groove in the surface of the cylinder. And at the same time, it can then play the audio back. So the metal circle on that on the cylinder, that's the mechanism with a stylus attached to it. And then on the other end of that, you can attach a cone, which funnels the sound during recordings and amplifies the sound during playback. Here on the right, you can see a small orchestra huddled around the cone during a recording session at Edison Studios in New York in 1916. As you can see, the singer is singing right into the cone, and the band is packed in closely behind. In the image on the left, you can see a woman named Frances Densmore at a recording session with Mountain Chief from the Blackfoot tribe. This photo is also from 1916, and just looking at it, though, it's difficult to tell if they're recording something or just listening to a playback. In either case, though, it shows the ethnographic implications of the early history of recorded sound. Frances Densmore was interested in studying and preserving the language and music of the Native Americans, and so this is what it looked like just a little bit after the turn of the century. And by the way, if you've ever tried to record music yourself nowadays, you'll recognize this as a much different process. Back in the days of the phonograph, you essentially had one take, right? And it either worked or it didn't. So there are a couple of ways to discover these recordings. If you want to look at the actual physical cylinders, you could make an appointment with a special collections that has them, like, for example, the USC Special Collections, which you can see on the left there. You can find these cylinders in the finding aid, and you can request an appointment to examine them, but you can't actually listen to them at USC. So in order to hear them, you would have to visit a website like the University of California, Santa Barbara Cylinder Audio Archive. That's what you see on the right-hand side. And the UCSB site allows you to browse the collection by genre, instrument, topic, and so on. Or you could enter a search term or a call number or something like that. So cylinders were a dominant sound recording format into the late 1920s and early 1930s. Because of the era that they represent, when you're working with these materials, you have to navigate certain genres. And one of those genres is the minstrel show, where mostly white performers wore blackface and portrayed racist stereotypes of African Americans. As you see in the metadata here, the archive actually has a subject heading for minstrel music. I'm going to play an excerpt of this song, and I want you to pay attention both to the quality of the recording and to the content.
On the old banjo, while the southern breezes blow, I'd hum the hours away until the break of day, and to my baby love I'd say, Dinah dear, won't you please come out to me? Dinah dear, can't you hear my mournful plea? My poor heart is pining for thee.
Okay, so that's about a minute of the 4 minutes. As this format started to be developed, this became a reality of the genre, and of the this genre became a reality of the industry. And so as you see, the cylinder holds about 4 minutes of music, and that was enough to preserve songs from these minstrel theater performances, which flourished in the 19th century and declined in the 20th century. The cylinders of minstrel music allow us to study one of the folk literatures of the era, including its racist portrayals of Black culture. In the next lesson, we'll talk about the gramophone record, which was a flat disc instead of a cylinder. And because of its format, it could hold audio on both sides, audio content on both sides of the disc. And you could therefore listen to a little bit more than 4 minutes of music. Now, let's see here. There we go. Now I wanted to do a short activity. This is the basically the end of the lesson. I want to give you a chance to find a cylinder at the UCSB Cylinder Archive or a phonautogram from the First Sounds website. Whoops. Let's see. Let's copy a link address so that I can put that here into the chat. And so here is the link to there's the link to the Cylinder Archive, and let me grab here the link to the First Sounds page. And the activity is now go to either one of these links, choose one of them, and find a cylinder or a phonautogram, and then put the name of the selection into the chat, and also write a line or two about why a researcher might want to study the piece that you selected. And of course, keep in mind the value it had for people at the time it was made and the value it has for researchers nowadays. And of course, think about issues of technology, culture, and history. So that's the end of the lesson for today. While people are putting, just, find a record, take a minute or two, find a recording, put it into the chat, and then just a line about what its value is for research, why someone would want to study it. And I'll just show you, I did this exercise with my mother, and she selected here, I Love a Lassie by a man named Harry Lauder. And this is under the Scottish Wit and Humor category at the Cylinder Archive. And just something that she said about it was that it reminded her of her father because he had Harry Lauder albums and they listened to them. And my grandfather sang the songs with a Scottish accent. And so it was a nice memory for my mom. And the song, when we listened to it together, it had these descriptions of flowers, which she said painted a picture of Scotland that she could see in her mind. So yeah, she didn't say exactly what value they had to research, but for homework, if you'd like, take a listen to the I Love a Lassie song on the Cylinder Archive, and maybe you can imagine yourself what value this type of recording has among the different recordings that are available there. So, okay, so yeah, please, if you don't have a chance right now to put your selection in the chat, you're more than welcome to email me take some time and look at it and email me the answers. You email me your selection and your response at any point in time. I will stop sharing my screen now.